the Haines City Church of Midweek Bible Study. My name's Dwight Graves, and I'm the Bible study instructor. Good to have you with us this morning. We're talking this morning about Psalm 64, reading from the New King James Version of the Bible. And the title is Secret Plots and Sudden Shots. It's talking about the oppressed by the wicked, but rejoicing in the Lord. Verse 1, Hear my voice, O God, in my meditation. Preserve my life from fear of the enemy. Hide me from the secret plot of the wicked, from the rebellion of the workers of iniquity, who sharpen their tongue like a sword, and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, bitter words. But they themselves in an evil manner. They talk of life. We have perfected a shrewd scheme. Both the inward thought and the heart of man are deep. But God shall shoot at them with an arrow. Suddenly they shall be wounded. So he will make them stumble over their own tongue. All men shall fear and shall declare the word of God. The upright in heart shall glory. Dear Father, I thank you for this opportunity to study your word this morning. I pray that you open our hearts and minds to receive your word. Give me the words that you would have to be spoken this morning. And bless those that are listening this morning as we open up your word. Lord, just give us understanding and wisdom. And I thank you for it in Christ's name. Amen. This letter is addressed to the chief musician, a Psalm of David. As many of David's Psalms it concerns a crisis that was made in his life sometime. We can't really pinpoint what crisis he was in when this particular Psalm was written, but it was a psalm to a specific event in David's life. It was certainly that it was something that happened to him. And he's now taking the opportunity. Preserve my life from fear of the enemy. This is kind of an interesting turn of events. Either David meant that his meditation was vocal so that God could hear his voice, or that God would hear the silent expression of his heart and his voice. We don't have to holler for God to hear us. We don't even have to speak. God knows our heart. And when we pray and we silently pray and concentrate on God, he knows what we're doing. He understands. It is our duty to know how constantly David turns to prayer. If you read the Psalms, David constantly turned to God for help and assistance and put his trust in him. You know, several times I've spoken about that. Started with the lions and the bears that he fought to keep the sheep when he was a young man. All these times he turned to prayer. He turned to God and he asked God. But it's still our duty to see or use David as an example to show us that we need to do the same thing. We need to be constant in prayer. David used prayer as a battle axe and a weapon of war. That's what he used to fight off these things with, because he went to war, but he went with God's wisdom and knowledge and understanding and God's back. God gave him strength to win. He used it under every pressure, whether of inward sin or outward wrath. And David did sin, and there was times he had to ask for forgiveness, and he had to seek out God for that. There could have been a foreign invasion or a domestic rebellion. And we can see that today in our own society. It's not just in America, it's worldwide. And it's all because of one thing that happened and people turned it into destruction. We act wisely if we make a prayer to God, our first and best trusted resource in every hour of need. So no matter what we need to go to God first. Second part of verse 1 says, Preserve my life from fear of the enemy. The word fear is commonly translated as dread, and speaks of something greater than the normal fear of battle. Anybody that's ever been in a battle or a fight, you got to fear that you're going to die. Something's going to happen to you. But you still fight, and you still go forward. David knew how crippling this kind of war movies on TV. It shows people that are so scared in battle that they can't fight. They just freeze or hide or try to get low on the ground. And that's the type of fear that kills you. In the second line, note that the word dread, which means another word for paralyzing, whereas fear can be sobering and healthy. Fear can put us back on the right track and put us back to seeking God. But do we do that? We need to see what God has done in our life in the past and have faith to believe He can do it again in the future. Put our faith in Him. Every sentence reveals the relentless fury and remorseless elusiveness and cruelty of the foes by whom surrounded David. Conscious of all this, he had one. A good fear is where you realize there's danger. A bad fear is when you get to the point you're so afraid you're ready to run and give up. Those are the things I think David is talking about here. We need to learn to pray as the psalmist does. We need to, not so much for the deliverance from enemies, but as deliverance from the fear that the enemies cause. If we get rid of the fear, then we can think plainly and listen to God and see what He wants us to do. And there's a fear of this sickness going around the world. There's a fear of it where people don't even go out, and there's other people that don't have the fear of it and go out and do whatever they want to. It's, that's their way of dealing with things. But David wanted to be delivered from the fear of the enemy. Verse 2, hide me from the secret plots of the wicked, from the rebellion of the workers of iniquity. David knew that there were dangerous enemies plotting his destruction. He felt powerless to make them stop. So he put into this and translated it. The same scripture said, hide me from the conspiracy of the wicked. But David is asking God to help him during this time when these enemies are coming against him and trying to kill him. You know that all the way back through David's history, somebody was trying to put him away. Morgan stated, this is the singer's distress. The warfare is unequal. His foes are not out in the open, but under cover. The hardest enemy to detect are those that are in hiding. And we'll get into that as we go a little bit farther into the lesson today. 2 Corinthians 4:2 says, but we have renounced the hidden things of shame, not walking in craftiness, nor handling the word of God deceitfully, but by manifestation of the truth, commending ourselves to every man's conscience in the sight of God. Their methods cannot afford to be those of honest opposition, the open statement of the truth. If somebody's trying to knock you down and destroy what you're doing, 90% of the time it's going to be the lies that you come up with, the way they present it to other people. As you can tell, it's really easy to get a crowd mixed into a place where they're really, really ready to fight. Galatians 2:11 says, now when Peter had come to Antioch, I withstood him to his face, because he came from James, he would eat with the Gentiles. But when they come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing those who were of the circumcision. Peter was not, he was had a weakness that put him in circumstances he should not have been in. But it said David had come to Antioch, and when they withstood him to his face, because he was to be blamed before certain men, he would come out and say certain things, I think is what they're saying. But when they come, he withdrew and separated himself from them. Who they come, it could have been God's people, it could have been other things he really didn't say. But he withdrew and separated himself from them. Peter done the same thing with Christ in the courtyard. When it comes down to the point where they pointed him out as one of his followers, he said, "No, I don't know him." And then when they came and they saw him, he left and ran. Those things, we need the strength to do that, but we get the strength from God to be able to do that. And I think that's what David is saying here. We need to separate ourselves from these things and look for God's help. Verse 3, who sharpened their tongue. The secret plots against David consisted in words and lies against him. The easiest thing is some people can tell you a lie and make you believe it. You ever had anybody do that to you? I think all of us have sometimes. But all pushing toward his destruction and trying to destroy David probably because the king wanted him destroyed because of who the people thought he was and knew that he was anointed to be king. And the king was scared that David was going to take his place before time. You know, this is not a case of words merely hurting people. This is an action that was actually used to conspire to kill somebody. In the context of this war of lies, the ambush would be either the prepared situation which frames an innocent man, or the shelter or concealment from which a rumor can be launched without fear. If you basically be related to like a sniper. You know, I worked with a guy that was a sniper overseas, and he hit the target from a mile away. You can't see that far. But that's what they're doing. They're trying to destroy their enemy. It's like a demon inside of them, because that's all they drive for is to kill them. Vipers and cobras are harmless and innumerable creatures compared to such a reptile. The devil himself might blush at being the father of so base an offering. But where does that hatred come from? Where does that animosity come from that we wanted to kill somebody and destroy them? It comes from the enemy. Verse 4, that they may shoot in secret at the blameless. Suddenly they shoot at him and do not fear. David knew that his enemies fired their bitter words as an arrow against him. And when they did, it didn't bother them in the least. They did not fear either David or God. When we lose the fear of God, we've lost everything. Psalm 64 emphasizes the devious nature of David's enemies. They use secret plots. They shoot in the secret. They attack suddenly, especially because David mentions an attack by arrows from a hidden or secret position. His enemies act like the ancient version of snipers. The key word here is suddenly. When something suddenly happens to you, and I go back to military time. If you're out on patrol and somebody shoots at you, it's sudden and very unexpected. It's without warning. You had no idea they were that close to you. David knew how dangerous it was in battle, for he fought many battles. If a hidden archer worked as a sniper, if he could see and confront his enemy one at a time, a warrior such as David could take these, he would take these chances by doing what he did, but he also had a chance to eliminate them. The hidden sniper was a great concern to be put down by an arrow by way back in David's time. When they shot arrows, they shot them up in the air at a long distance. And you might not never see it coming till it hits you. David's enemies didn't use literal arrows, but they attacked him secretly, anonymously, without the courage to say things to your face. They shot at him like a sniper shoots at a man who has no way to defend himself. If you shoot at him from a hiding place, you might not be able to shoot a second arrow, but that first arrow could kill somebody. Verse 5, they encouraged themselves. He said they encouraged themselves in an evil manner. They get strength from these lies and things they're telling, and it grows into doctrine. A small group of a big group. And it don't take very many people to start with. But it gets worse than that because people get hurt, people get killed. Many people have conspired against him, planning secret traps and snares against David, unafraid of what God will do, unafraid of what man can do. They have one thing in common. All they want to do is kill David. Kind of like they might have had a bounty on him. But who will see that? They foolishly believe that they are not accountable to anyone. They can do this and get by with it. Is it war? Is it just a state of being, as is expressed by their confident questions? They encourage themselves. Good men are frequently discouraged, and not frequently, unfrequently discourage one another. If you're doing something wrong and somebody else is doing something wrong, they encourage one another to do it more. And that's what it's saying here. But the children of darkness are wise in their generation, and they keep their spirits up, even though they're doing wrong. And each one has a cheering word to say to his fellow builder, to build them up. So if you spread the word, that means the group is bigger and bigger. We have perfected a shrewd scheme. They were proud in their evil plotting. They boasted of their sins, showing the dark depth of their thoughts and their heart. Verse 6, they devise iniquities. We have perfected a shrewd scheme, both in the inward thought and the heart of man are deep. They search the devil's skull for new inventions. They look to him for new ways of doing this. Who is ready enough, the enemy is ready enough to lend him his 7 heads to plot and his 10 horns to put on, to push at good people. So basically what they've done, they're turning to the enemy. And they're looking for the evil one to get all these thoughts and all these things together to go against David and his type of people. The inward thought and heart of man are deep. The Hebrew literally speaks of men's hearts as being deep. The idea being that they are almost bottomless in their supply of evil deeds and cunning. I never thought of evil deeds being bottomless, but I guess if you do one, it's easier to do another one. And before long, that's your lifestyle. Verse 7, but God shall shoot at them with an arrow. Suddenly they shall be wounded. So he will make them stumble over their own tongue. All and shall declare the work of God, for they shall wisely consider his doing. But God shall shoot them with an arrow. The evil men opposing David acted as if they had all the arrows, that they had all the weapons that they needed to defeat David into his side. But David knew going to battle. And so many times in the scriptures, as we read, that David did go into battle and was victorious. God had an arrow of his own, and suddenly they shall be wounded. Who's going to be wounded? Those doing evil, those that are against him. David's enemies shot at him like snipers from hidden in high positions. David's friend was God in a higher and more hidden position than the world. They shot their poisonous words at David unexpectedly, without warning, as God would shoot back at them unexpectedly without warning. Suddenly, God had them in his sight. They put themselves in the place that God knew they would be. But suddenly they shall be wounded. Reminds us that often the judgment of God comes upon the wicked very unexpectedly, without any warning. They think everything is fine until the day they're wounded. They have no idea that things are fixing to end. The brevity of God's countermeasure, after his elaborate screaming of the wicked, tells us its own decisive tale. That when the time comes, God will be there. He will end what is going on. Verse 8, so he will make them stumble over their own tongue. All who see them shall flee away. They used their lies and slander to attack David. And you can tear down a good man by lies and slander, just by spreading them lies around. But there's going to be a time coming, the lies will end. God will find a way to make their own words their ruin. Remember, several times we've talked about digging a pit for trapping an animal, and they get caught in their own pit. I think this goes back to that same thing, that they get so involved in trying to destroy David that they fall into their own traps. They would trip in the very way they hoped to trap David. Verse 9, all men shall fear and shall declare the work of God, for they shall wisely consider his doing. David was confident that God would use his dealings against these wicked men as lessons to others. Do we see what's happening to others that could change our life for the better? I think that's what it's saying here. We watch all this that's going on TV. We see what's going on in America. We see what's going on in the world. That can be lessons to us to show us the wicked way and the right way. But it's coming out now. When they saw the evil plotters wounded by God, they would learn. Previously, the wicked asked, who will see them? Who does see you do what you do? God does. You can go about any place around now, you've got cameras, and people see what you're doing. They identify by cameras now. But there's a time coming when the great white throne judgment comes, that all will be judged. Everyone will see then exactly what they were. God will use that to teach us a lesson for all men. We can see how God acts in the world today and we just need to see that and use that as a lesson for not just us, but our family and our kids. Let them see what God can do in their lives if they only let him work. When your judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. Isaiah 26:9b. When God judges, his righteousness will be in the earth. People will see that everything was true that was said about God and what he was going to do. Those who might have been bold in sin shall be made to tremble and to stand in awe of the righteous judge. When it comes that day, it's too late. It's too late. Verse 10, the righteous shall be glad in the Lord and trust in him, and all the upright in heart shall glory. God's dealing with the wicked would be a lesson to all men, but it would be special joy to the righteous. Our time's coming when we stand before God. They had special reason to be glad that God was vindictive and his servants were protected. His sorrow sooner or later and his disciples. And trust in him. It would not only bring joy to us, but it also increases our faith if we trust in God. We put our trust in him. We can go back and see what God done for David. We can see what God done in our families. We can see what God's done in our church. And we can use that to demonstrate to others just what God can do. That's what God needs us to do. We observe and we see the providence increase in faith and all these things that's happening. Since he fulfills the threatenings, makes a promise, he'll keep. If he makes a threatening, he'll keep it too. Because he has a way to protect his people. But God will not protect his promise. Forget his promises. We shouldn't forget God's promises either. So the answer in verse 1, to be preserved from panic, is more than an answer. The judgment is still future. The joy can break out already, because we know that time is coming. It is a sober joy, with the facts faced at their worst. And it seems like the things are at worst in our society today than they've been during our lifetime. but it's an overall well best when we stand before God. And that time is coming. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this word this morning. I thank you for the words you've given me to speak. I ask you to give wisdom and knowledge to those that hear the word this morning. Help them to understand it. Lord, let them see what you can do in their lives. Lord, I ask you to protect those that need protected. Lord, heal the sick that have been sick from this virus. Be with them, strengthen them. We lift them up to you. Be with those that are not saved, Lord. We ask you, Lord, that they would be saved and turn to you in this time of need. Lord, we just lift these needs up to you, and we give you praise and glory and honor for them. In Christ's name, amen. I think it's raining. What's that?